Yeah.
Yeah, we know each other for 20 years, pretty much. And we always stayed in touch. I went to visit Michi in Brazil a few times. And we played there as well, but more like a concert here or there. And now, since we both live in Vienna, we knew that we wanted to work together. So we've been, through this friendship, we always share repertoire with each other. And now it's by having invited Vincent from Paris, it's kind of, I guess, yeah, our first bigger concert here in Austria together.
Well, I started actually quite when I was a kid, because I studied classical guitar, and so I got in touch with the works of Villa-Lobos and Laurindo Almeida and Baden-Powell, of course, and this touched me a lot when I was a kid. So kind of naturally I thought, okay, I want to do this like later on, but I'm not so consciously at the beginning. But then I went to Boston, to Berkeley, to study there, and I met a lot of Brazilians. And so I kind of could reconnect somehow. And from there I moved to São Paulo. Like I really wanted to go to Brazil to study deeper, because if you want to get to the root of a style, I think you have to go to that place to really check it out, because there are the masters, the story, the whole baggage of the music. So I went to Brazil and started to really dive into it even more, and nowadays I really play mostly Brazilian music. It's not so formal. I think very opposed to like in India a little bit,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like African music, it's passed on, like it's a tradition, and there's not so much stuff written actually. I mean, nowadays it's getting better, but when I started, this was in 2003 in Brazil. So I remember like the first year I was there, I took a car and I drove to to meet a guy who played traditional samba guitar. I got lost. There was no Google yet. I was like, taking turns, like stopped in the middle of nowhere. But at one point, I got just to meet this guy, and we played the whole afternoon. He invited me, we had a coffee, and I recorded it. It was so great. This was like my first personal kind of lesson. But this guy he's a master for himself, but it's not like officially recognized as a master. But for me, he was like great because. And I met him like in a parking place where there was this Roda de Samba. This is this samba like group that are just playing, for people to drink and have fun there. So this was really great.
I guess India is more formal in this way.
Yeah.
It's also oral tradition, classical music, you should say. That's what I got into. It started with a big bang for me actually, because I met my guru. I met him when I was 15 years old, and he came through Austria to do a workshop. A masterclass, and I had no idea of Indian music at all, or Indian rhythm. And he's a grandmaster, and when you meet him, you feel the weight. And I met him when I was 15, and actually he, on the second day of our meeting, he asked to meet my father. He said, "Can you bring your father?" And then my teacher, who organized the workshop, he said, "Oh, wait, what is it about, and so on." And then my guru said, "I think Bernie should come with us, can come with me to India and really learn this." It was a cultural venue called Akku in Austria, in the countryside, which was run by a professor from the conservatory, so from a very good musician who was my teacher, and he started to invite international musicians.
Yeah.
It's this there was a golden period where my guru, who is very traditional, he came through Europe for maybe 5-6 years in his life, in this time. And now he's not interested anymore. He doesn't want to travel. Before he didn't. And I was really lucky to be there in these few years where he was coming through, and that's where I met him. And so he really opened the door, and we were all shocked. Everybody was like, what just happened, and my father basically said, he has to finish school, and then he can go when he's 18. Wow. But if you want to stay in touch, you can stay in touch. And then every year my guru would come, and it started with very small things, like he would tell me, tomorrow you come to the hotel and you pick me up, and we walk together to the workshop place. And this is how it works in India. So it's like half an hour of one-on-one time, and that's when the teaching starts. It's the old system. It's called Guru Shishya Parampara. Parampara means tradition and Guru student tradition.
Okay.
And then basically came the point when I went to India with 18, he said to me, look, you can either be a Western student, there's no problem. You can pay me money, you can come whenever you want, blah, blah, blah. Or you can become an Indian student. The choice is yours.
And you chose the
I
last
chose the Indian way, yeah. And then there was lots of things. So like I would pick him up at 4:30 every day in the morning to go for a walk.
Wow.
That was the ritual.
It's so different. It's like it's two sides of the world, you know. It's so crazy, really. Yeah, but I mean, like at the end, you know, it's also even in Brazilian music. I mean, just to. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's like, I mean, there's a lot of effort you have to put into it, you know, because people in Brazil, they're laid back, but the musicians, they're really on top of things, and they spend a lot of time with their instrument and their tradition, you know. It's just the way, you know, it's not so like in this package, because I really admire this also. This is beautiful, you know. And at the end, I think we come to the same point, you know, like it gets to really have to like polish and work on your art to be able to get the message to the people, you know.
Yeah, well, I started to go when I was 18, and I used to go every year for 6 or 8 months until I was 24. Yeah, so you could say over the course of 6 years, I was there for about 3 years, I would say in total. And then I kind of graduated within the system. It's again when your guru tells you rhythm is everywhere. Yeah, so then at the age of 24, I kind of reached the point where my guru said to me, so now you can always keep coming and you should keep coming, but you now have to go out and you have to digest it. Because I'm not an Indian musician. I don't play an Indian instrument. So it was a big experiment. It was always the translation of the classical rhythms onto the drums, to the drum kit. That was the big experiment. I only learned the language, and the sessions would be like this. So my guru would sing the rhythms to me, and I have to sing them back to him. And only when he felt that I was correct in the intonation and the inflection, then he said, okay, now you go to your instrument and you translate it. So then I would go, I have a drum kit in a room, then I would go and work for a few days, and then I would come back and show him, and then he would tell me, oh no, you need to get a different bass, or ta, you know, the titikite, traka, all the syllables, how to translate them. And in the beginning it was very strict, and then of course as he saw that as I got more into it, then he gave me more freedom. And now this is part of the digestion process, is that you can play the compositions in a very literal way, but you could also approach them from a more abstract, contemporary European perspective. And my challenge is always to find the middle ground somewhere.
Well, you have like in Afro descendant music, you have always this concept of clave, you know. This is like a rhythm pattern that you have in Brazil, you have it everywhere. And you can reduce it kind of to numbers somehow, you know. Although it's like a different approach, you know. But then if you like start to dive into this, you know, Bernie definitely did also this, you know, you can like, there's no problem infusing.
So come together.
I mean, even Indians, I think they can look at a clave and they reduce it to numbers kind of. Although I think this is a different concept, you know, but because musically it's not so super complex. I mean, like the clave by itself, you know, what happens around, I think is super complex. But but then we get to the concept of what is groove actually, where it comes from, you know, and that's what we're discussing all the time.
I mean, this is more what we actually share. We always talk about different grooves, we talk about different claves, we talk about, because Michi knows a lot through his work and also through the app that he's created, almost like an encyclopedia of Brazilian rhythm. So, and this is something I got interested in. I mean, I got kind of, you know, I got the vaccine, let's say, because I was in Cuba and I ended up in the Santeria ritual because I wanted to be there, but then the rhythm, I mean, that atmosphere, that power of the music, you know, that kind of got me to Brazil after, to the candomblé experience, and to South Africa and also to Morocco. And so, because once you feel that energy, it's not about the complex, it is very complex. It's complex in a different way. Yeah. And once you get the vaccine, you know, the virus.
The virus.
You are
a good guy this shape.
Yeah, you need to, and I'm very fascinated with it, and I kind of hope that I would like to bring together this idea of maybe very complex things, but also based around community music, spiritual music, clave music.
Yeah.
I mean, like for me, you know, I did also, I studied at 2 universities. I studied in Linz, where Bernie also studied, and then later on I studied at Berkeley in Boston. And after that experience, I really wanted to learn popular music the way it was taught, like traditionally. That means like orally, you know, like someone passes you, see it, you maybe record some stuff, but you learn a lot of music. I mean, I learned, like, I tried to learn by heart, like all kind of stuff. I was trying to get like the grooves, like from, you know, in Brazil, like João Bosco, Djavan, Gil. And there's a very important guy for me who's called Roberto Mendes. He's like from the interior of Bahia, Santo Amaro. He has a very particular style, and a friend of mine introduced me to him, and he was like, this was a kind of teacher for me, you know, like the way seeing him, the way he plays and he feels these grooves from this region. This really like was a game changer for me. It was like, wow, okay, this guy, wow, he's doing this that way, you know, and it's so light and it's so smooth, you know, but at the same time it's so hard grooving, you know. And this is like a secret, you know, how can you groove, you know, and make it like, I don't know, make it look easy somehow, you know. I mean, Brazil is very special in this anyway, you know, because
so many different rhythms.
Yeah, and also they are it's very smooth, but on the other hand, it's very tight, you know. I mean, it's not like that they're like, boo. It's like really wow.
You have the rhythmic complexity, you have the harmonic complexity, you have the melodic side in Brazil. You have all the influence from also indigenous music, the sounds of the Amazonas. I mean, if you talk about percussion, about multi-percussion, it's actually the Brazilian percussionists are kind of the archetypes of the multi-percussionist. They're the first ones to bring together rattles from the forest with congas, atabaque, with bells, and it's very rich. And I mean, when you talk about bringing things together, I guess I remember one incident when we played at your house maybe 8 years ago in São Paulo with Chico Ségal. We had a jam session in the kitchen.
Chico Ségal.
He's a very good friend.
How it should be, you know, in the kitchen on the table there was a bottle of cachaça and there was some pimentos, right? And you play, and we played, and then afterwards Michi and I were talking about the phrasing of the music, because I was not yet aware so much about other cultures, let's say, or I was still just coming out of this dust under the big cloud. And the way you play in India is, in terms of the tempo, you push it a lot. So you play against, in front of the beat, and you create this urgency. And we talked about this, and Michi kind of commented that my phrasing was different, not wrong, but it was very Indian. And we actually both agreed that it didn't really work so well, you know. I mean, it could have worked better if I had adjusted my phrasing a little bit. But of course, I wasn't able at the time. But now this is something that we care about, you know, like how, in terms of the fine notes, how do you have to adjust your phrasing in order to fit into a musical situation so that it starts to gel?
But I remember this when I arrived in Brazil, you know, because I then played with a lot of guys, you know, like the best guys, and I worked with them when we did a lot of stuff together. And at the very beginning, I had also a kind of musical anxiety, you know, how you say, you go there, even if you play samba, you know, you play like, tak, tak, tak. It's very hard, like the way you play, but then the guy starts to... It's like, okay, wow, man, first you chill, and then you know, there's the secret, because then it starts to like, it's like a pumping thing. It's like, it's like very, and it gets very intense, you know. But if you like really want to like do it hard, it's not going to work, you know. But and because he was talking about Chico, I mean, you asked like about teachers, like Ségal. He's for people who don't know, but he's very well known, and he is a very open-minded person also to different people. So I met him at the very beginning when I arrived there, and we became really good friends. At one point I lived even in his place, and I produced his CD of him. We have a lot of compositions that we did together, and he was a great influence for me, not just in music but also in the way of living, because he's like, it's so different what I grew in the environment that I grew up with, because he grew up in countryside of Paraíba. That's a state in the northeast of Brazil, and it's like savanna kind of, and he has like 11 siblings, sisters. And I mean, the way, and I was there at his place, and it's so crazy because it feels kind of like Africa, like all the time, like 30 people in the house, you don't even know who are relatives, who are friends, and you just, they serve you all the time. They're super nice, it's like, it's not systematic at all, it's not like, we leave at 2. It's like, then at one point the group decides in a dynamic way, okay, now we're gonna leave, and so it's and the way he looks at life. I mean, this was really, afterwards, it's always like this. If you learn a new thing, it's at one point you're like, wow, I want to be like this. But then you kind of get it into it, and then you put it in your own way, because that's the most important thing. You have to you find your own way. You can't copy anyone in life. No. I mean, you have to have your own voice. My wife, she's a singer, Tamires Tanus, very nice Brazilian singer, and I produced her last CD. And Vincent, he has a strong Brazil connection. Actually, he produced Selma. She's a good singer, I think you know her also. And then we went to record with him in Paris. And so we were like, because we were invited by Albert and Johan to do this project, and they kind of suggested, well, it would be nice to have someone, a third voice around, and also like a complementary instrument, and who would be this guy and stuff. And we were talking to Johan, and they, well, Vincent would be great, But I recorded with him, but now that we spend a lot of time together, and this guy is so great. I mean, we had such a great time, and musically it's very also enriching, because he knows a lot of languages.
Vincent is amazing. Yeah. I mean, I would really say multilingual, truly multilingual. Yeah. He speaks all the musical languages. He has experiences. He's played with people from everywhere. Yeah. And that fine understanding. This note, the rhythms are the same, but then how do you produce it? And he's got a lot of languages that he has mastered. And so for us, the process was really fantastic to be with him and to work on the music, and then ideas would come about where or how to play it. And so it was.
But actually, there was a connection, because when we recorded in Paris in 2018 with him, he knew Bernhard already from Sheila Raman. I mean, you didn't play. You played Sushila Raman. You played.
Worked with an Indian artist that I worked a lot, and she had told him at the time when I played with her, "Oh, I have this new guy in the band," and I think since then, and she told me about him, but we hadn't met. But so
it was a beautiful connection, definitely. And I was happy also that he knew Bernie. He was like, "Wow, he's so great! The guy plays."
Wow, what a great opportunity then.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you so much.
And really looking forward.
Yeah.